Hello, this is Hollisa Alewine. Welcome to our continuing study in the resurrection called 50,000 Degrees and Cloudy. We're going to go back to the question we had of how high exactly is this Garden of Eden that we can't see anymore, but it's right over Israel, we know that, but I think we can go back again to the scriptures and it'll give us more clues. We've been thinking about, okay, we're going to be caught up into the clouds, and then we saw in the Torah that, well, you know, the cloud wasn't out of sight. The cloud was pretty close. In fact, we know the cloud would descend to speak to Moshe, but even when it went back up, it wasn't very high. It wasn't out of sight. Everybody could still see it, because when it was time to move, they would all gather up and move. If we're talking about the cloud that they were dwelling in, then, you know, it was basically right here on this earth. Whereas, you know, we looked at in the time of King David, where it described the armies of God marching in the tops of the balsam trees. So a treetop is not that far away. So let's think some more about that question. Because again, Yeshua talked so much about entering into the kingdom, basically going into, not about, you know, being sucked into the stratosphere somewhere. This ascension might be more in terms of understanding our spiritual transformation than maybe even understanding it from a physical standpoint. Even though pretty much physical is all we have to go by. But when you ascend into the presence, as Paul said, to be with the Lord, and we know it's accompanied by a shout and the voice of the archangel, as we saw, the Greek word there for air was not in outer space, it was in normal air where you breathe normally. It wouldn't even be, you know, a mountaintop where the air would be thin. It would be normal air. So it has to be talking about more than just a physical ascension or a physical going up. It has to be a spiritual ascension, an elevation of the spirit. Again, moving back into an area that we could see before sin entered the world, but now it's very difficult to see it, and it's basically comprehended by faith. That's the whole idea of walking in faith, because you can't walk by sight because you can't see it anymore unless you have a special dream, vision, revelation, or whatever, and that's not to discount those sorts of things. People do experience them. But for the most part, it's concealed from our sight because we live in fallen, limited physical bodies. In Revelation, it talks about the incense, which is the prayers of the saints, which is going up. And so think of the incense altar in the tabernacle or the temple. How far would that smoke go? If we think even of the smoke of the altar, how far up would the smoke go? Let's go back to Judges, to the book of Judges, and see if we can get some ideas about what happens when you go up, where we could actually place that. And it's, I believe, Judges 13, 19 through 20. And it's discussing, remember the birth announcement, basically, of Samson. Because Manoach and his wife are offering a sacrifice, and they receive this news that they're going to have a son, Samson or Shimshon. And the angel who's delivering this news, he goes up in these smoky flames while they're watching. He goes up from the altar So I want you to picture that and consider an altar with smoke, whether it's incense or an actual sacrifice. How far up does the smoke go? You can see it. And the smoke won't go so high that the smoke actually goes out of sight before you stop seeing it. It will simply dissipate. It will get to a certain level, and then the smoke dissipates. And so, to the human eye, when you ascend into this realm of Gan Eden, like this angel is going to basically disappear out of their sight, he's, by all rational thought, going back into the garden, going back into that realm. He's ascending into that realm of the heavens, and it's a realm inhabited by angels. It's that spiritual realm that we don't see. So at first, if we're looking at that smoke, it has formation. It's a more tangible thing. But as it rises, it evaporates. It goes out of human sight. It just, like, it was there and now it's not. But what remains afterward? It's that odor. It's the smell of smoke that will remain and remind us of what was there just a moment ago, but it's not there anymore. So likewise, we can see this angel, he's doing the same thing. It says, so Manoach took the young goat with the grain offering and offered it on the rock to the Lord, and he performed wonders, while Manoach and his wife looked on. For it came about when the flame went up from the altar toward heaven, that the angel of the Lord ascended in the flame of the altar. When Manoach and his wife saw this, they fell on their faces to the ground. All right, that does sound pretty fantastic. But picture this angel, if his appearance is tied to the ascension of the flame and the smoke that would go out of that flame, even the highest point of that flame, right? The highest point of the flame, the smoke would have actually been higher, but it says the flame. So he ascended in the flame of the fire. Now, when we go back to those rivers of Eden, remember the definition of a river is something that's burning and shining. And this is possibly where some of the pagan religions got the idea that you had to cross a certain river to get into the underworld. I know, like the river Styx from Greek mythology and so forth. And they're not the only culture that has this tradition, so probably they've got an ancient cultural memory of what was going on with the rivers of Eden. And these rivers basically are fire and water, which is the nature of heaven. Shemaim, you hear fire, Esh, and you hear Maim, water, fire, water. And in the spirit realm, if there is righteousness, then the flame has no power. You know, like it says, you will walk through the fire, you won't be burned. You'll walk through the water, you won't be drowned. In other words, in this state of supernatural protection and holiness, then what would be destructive to a wicked person, to a completely natural fallen person, the flame would burn them, or the water would drown them. But if we look at the furnace in the book of Daniel, you have 3 people in a flame where the flames are not affecting them whatsoever. It's actually, singeing the garments of people outside the flame. And then they see this 4th man in the flame. And we get the idea that when you're walking in that supernatural protection of the Holy Spirit, then the judgment of flame and water has no power over you. You're actually at home in those places. So just this image of the angel ascending in the fire, it makes you think of those fiery rivers of Eden and the protection that they offered Adam and Eve as long as they were living in a state of righteousness within the garden. So the angel disappears in the flame of the altar. He's going back into that realm. So let's think of the righteous souls under the altar. In Revelation, remember, it says the souls are under the altar crying out, "How long, O Lord?" What are they crying out for? Well, we think they say, until you have avenged our blood. And it's not that they're that bloodthirsty. All right, I can't imagine that they would be that bloodthirsty. But you have to remember what the souls are waiting for. They're waiting for the resurrection, because even if they are under the altar or they're under the throne of the Holy One, even if they have these robes of righteousness, that's still not the end goal of the plan. The end goal of the divine plan is to be resurrected back into a physical body, that bone and bone, flesh and flesh, sinew and sinew would come back together, and we would be restored to that Edenic state so that we could serve the Holy One in his kingdom. So they're crying out, "How long, O Lord?" They want their bodies. Temporary robes are fine, but they want their bodies. They want the resurrection of the entire body. And that's what I meant in the previous program when I talked about when you're in a state of grief. Your soul has been knit into this other person's. When that soul is torn away from you, it's like leaving nerve endings where something was once connected. And in that state of grief, you're going to remain in that state of grief until there's some healing in those nerve endings. But ultimately, you were designed to be able to go right back in. When we're talking about the body of Messiah, there's going to be a restoration, not just of the individual soul. That's not what they're crying out for, just avenge me. They're saying all this innocent blood that's been shed, and the collection of the righteous souls, there's no moving forward for us in the divine plan until that last soul comes in and is clicked into place. And that's only going to take place when the entire body of Messiah is ready to ascend. So even if we think about that lower garden as being a place of preparation for ascension into the upper garden, then how could we even hope of that until that last soul is brought in, until the body of Messiah is complete? Because until that time, those souls are separate from their bodies. Even though they're in a safe place, they're under a holy altar, they're still longing for their blood to be avenged on the earth so that they can acquire these superior bodies and robes of light in the Garden of Eden. And you say, well, which garments of light are you talking about? Well, there was a chapter in section 1 that we didn't go over about these Edenic bodies. What constitutes clothes in the garden? And I'd encourage you to get the book so you can go back and take a look at that particular chapter. But in a nutshell, the bodies that we were created with had robes of light. All right, we had robes of righteousness. Why were they righteous? Basically, they were robes of obedience. And when you're obedient to the word, we know that the Torah is a light and the commandment is a lamp. When the light and the lamp, the Torah and the commandments, are so much a part of you that they really are you, then you are going to radiate a light like Moses did. Remember how the light shined out of his face and he'd have to cover it? Well, those are real clothes. The light, the garments of righteousness, the robe of salvation and the robe of righteousness. There's basically two garments. You've got the garment of salvation and the robe of righteousness. So we want a garment of salvation, but that robe of righteousness is the whole point of walking in the Word, walking in the Torah. so that at the day when your body is restored to you, that original body can reveal those original clothes, which is the Torah and the commandments, the light and the lamp that would radiate from your body. And according to Jewish tradition, when a soul dies, when our loved ones pass away, that the body is decaying, but it doesn't really show serious decay until about the third day. And there's specific things that happen, the blood, the fluid of the blood and so forth. By the third day, it kind of turns into a jelly-like state. It's not viscous, it's not fluid anymore. And that's when, the decay really sets in, about the third day. They say that the soul can hover around the body for up to 3 days. Some even say up to 7 days, which again, that's recognized in Scripture, the 3 days, the 7 days. But it may try to re-enter the body, especially the more separate the person has been from the presence of Adonai in his lifetime, the more separate from the Word that he's lived. And so that's the only home that soul has ever known. So as the angel separates him from the body, there might still be this hovering of the consciousness around that body. I know a lot of people, after a loved one passes, especially those first few days, they'll feel like the person is still there. Now that might be your mind playing tricks on you, or it might actually be true, that the soul might be hovering around the body for whatever reason before it's willing to move on with the angel to the next stage of their life after life. And when that soul sees a serious decomposition, they say, in other words, when that body starts to show the effects, that it's really dead, and it finally dawns on them, oh yeah, I am dead, then it's more willing to depart with the angel that is sent to collect it, to collect that soul and to basically store it wherever it needs to be stored. Of course, our expectation is that we will be stored under the altar, basically in the lower garden, until the resurrection. And that's why Yeshua's resurrection of Lazarus was so significant to those who were watching, because, this is a Jewish tradition. That soul, after 3 days, is, bam, gone. There's no point in calling it back because it's not coming back after 3 days. Yeshua intentionally, you talk about slow walking, Yeshua intentionally delayed coming to Lazarus. And he waits until this milestone is passed of 3 days, knowing that if he can call that soul forth from its storage place or from its sleep, is one way of looking at it. We're going to look at what sleep actually is. Calling that soul back into the body, that's going to be astounding to his Jewish onlookers, because after 3 days, he's gone. And that's what they say, hey, he stinks by now, Yeshua. Once they start stinking, then they don't come back. You can't resurrect after that time. Up until that time, they're fairly close around. The soul might enter back into the body, but not now. It's found its home. It's found its place. And if we read John 11:43, it says something very specific about what Yeshua does. It says, when he had thus spoken, remember that he says he's sleeping, don't worry about it. When he had thus spoken, he cried with a loud voice, Lazarus, come forth. That loud voice is what we're told we'll hear when Paul is writing to the Thessalonians in 1 Thessalonians 4:16, when he says the Lord himself will descend from heaven with a shout and with the voice of the archangel and the trumpet of God. In other words, it's going to be loud. Resurrection will be loud, at least to those who can hear it. I don't know if the wicked could actually hear it. If their spiritual eyes aren't in focus, I don't know that their spiritual ears would be too. But that loud voice is significant because that loud voice accompanies resurrection. Now, in a Jewish source, which is Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer, in chapter 34, it's a commentary on Ecclesiastes 12:7. And it says, the Ruach, or the Spirit, returns to God who gave it, once the 7 days of mourning after death are completed. They say there's a difficulty here. When you are excessively attached to the mortal world, remember that soul could hover around for 3 days or so until it sees, well, there's no one going back in there because that thing's starting to get pretty messed up. And at that point, they'll kind of like, okay, what's next? In fact, some of the more mystical rabbis say that if we could actually see into the spirit world right now, it would scare us to death. All the activity that's going on right around us, and we're just oblivious to it. And once you're dead, then you have that awareness of a lot of this activity. But when a human being has been excessively attached to this world, to the things of this world, to the things that are important in this world, to the accolades, to the honors, to the successes, to the pleasures, to the attention to be gained in this world, those things that are disconnected from the kingdom of heaven, the things that are personally pleasurable and rewarding, but really it's not doing any good for the body of Messiah. Those things can reflect where one's faith truly lies. Is your faith in your immediate gratification? Or do you recognize that much of what you're engaged in is going to vaporize upon death? Just like the smoke vaporizing out of a fire. Remember, you can be refined so that the deeds, the works that you're doing are silver and gold and bronze. Or it can be the wood, hay, and stubble. It's not going to make the trip. And at the end, it's not a matter of questioning your garment of salvation. It's a matter of questioning how much robe do you have on of righteousness? How much of the word are you wearing? Because the word is all about serving others and serving the kingdom and serving the king. And if you have been the king of your own world or the queen of your own world and only cultivated your own kingdom, then you may find that you're saved, but it's basically called being at the feet of the righteous. That your experience is not the same as someone who has truly lived a completely dedicated life of faith. And those sorts of people who are very attached to this world and what they can gain out of this world for themselves, they tend to be more attached to their bodies. And they just don't turn loose of it easily. A righteous person, they say, will gladly turn loose. In fact, one of the descriptions the rabbis wrote said, it's so easy to take the soul of a righteous person out of his body. It's just like picking a little hair off the surface of a glass of milk. It's nothing. It's effortless. They're more than ready to go. And so it makes it easier for that angel to harvest the soul and to take it to its next destination. One rabbi said that the Garden of Eden is upside down. He actually had this vision or dream or experience where he was allowed to see into the garden for a brief time. And they said, what did you see? And he said, it's upside down. And they said, what do you mean it's upside down? He said, well, the things that are important on this earth, he says, in the garden, they're really not that important. But the things that we think are unimportant on this earth, or we only pay, negligible attention to them, in the garden, they're really important. And so it's like everything's flipped upside down when you go into the garden. And so our job is to attach ourselves to the things that will be important in the garden, not the things that the world thinks are important. And so after this point, as the angel harvests the soul to take it to its next destination, there's all sorts of opinions about what happens next. If we assume that the spirit goes back to God, then of course the spirit has no problem. It's the soul that comes into question, that bundle of appetites, emotion, desire, intellect, your consciousness. Because we know the rich man still had consciousness after death, even though he had no body. He was still thirsty. He could still feel heat, but he had no body to satisfy it with. So apparently, as it concerns our spirit, we get that return as is. The one who put it in us accepts the return. And it's separated out of that corruptible body. And then the body's going to decompose and return to its source, to the dust. So again, the question, what happens to the nefesh? What happens to the soul and that consciousness beyond the grave? That's the part that most of us think about. That's the part that really matters, because we understand the body's going to stay right where it is until the resurrection. But where is the soul? What is the experience of the soul? And, this is the part of a righteous human being that is under the altar in the book of Revelation. Or in rabbinic thought, it would be the same place, basically. It would be under the throne. And, we have some clues in the book of Revelation. We have the beast and the woman. And it places emphasis on these two entities. Now, there's two kinds of woman in there. There's a virtuous woman, Israel, and the sign of her virtue is that she has children who keep the commandments of God and the testimony of Yeshua. On the other hand, there is the adulterous woman, or the harlot, and she represents apostate Israel, the ones who will depart from the covenant of their youth. And the harlot, we know, is riding a scarlet beast. Basically, she's riding a soul of sin because of the desires of her soul, her nefesh, which is symbolized by the color red, by the way. The soul itself, not sin. Although your sins be as scarlet, they will be as white as snow. So you can even see the symbolism there. But Ramban, one of the great Jewish sages, says of the soul, the nefesh, it is in the soul that the impulse to do wrong begins. When a person sins, intelligence departs, and for a moment, one behaves like an animal. So a person who spends his life submitting to his lower nature of the soul is basically riding the beast. They're behaving like an animal. But the one who allows the Ruach, the Spirit, to control the soul is behaving more in the nature of that divine Spirit that he was created to reflect. He's not riding the beast. Or maybe riding the beast is not the best description. The person who's riding the beast may actually be running away. The beast may be running away with him. He may be out of control. But the one whose spirit is in control of his soul has the beast under control. It's not riding him. He's directing every impulse of the soul. And so when we think about the rich man worrying in Sheol about what's going on with his family, what he's thinking is, we need to get the message to my brothers that they can't just act according to their animal selves. It's that divine spirit that was breathed into them that needs to guide their thinking and their doing. And this was the message that he wanted to send beyond the grave. So that gives us something to go by. What does a dead soul desire? Obedience.